Thank you, Walter. Thank you for being so nice. I think I'm going to pay for it later, but thank you for joining us, Mr. Secretary. You know, I want to start by echoing something that Walter Isaacson just said, which is that this is the ideal place to start, talking about education when we talk about innovation. And in a moment, we'll talk about what we mean when we talk about innovation. But I also want to introduce you at the beginning of this conference to something that you're going to see reflected time and time again throughout the sessions as they continue through tomorrow. And that's a new poll which has been conducted by Newsweek, commissioned by Newsweek, and conducted in cooperation with Intel. Now, if we take a look at this poll, you'll see that 4,800 interviews were done in the US, China, UK, Germany. We're going to see the results of this poll throughout, and you'll have breakout sessions tomorrow afternoon, which will also speak to them. And the full results are also contained in the Newsweek International magazines in your conference bags. Now, the first question, which you'll see tonight, which we're going to talk about, or at least use as our leaping off point, goes like this. When it comes to technological innovation, do you think the US is falling behind or staying ahead of other countries? Interesting response. 74% of US respondents said we're falling behind. 26% said we're staying ahead. And among those who say falling behind, which of the following, we asked, is the most responsible? 42% blame American schools, 17% blame the government, 16% blame US businesses, and 11% blame US workers. Lots of blame to go around, but tonight we're here to talk about the first part, which is what happens in the US schools. So first of all, I want to start, Secretary Duncan, by asking you if you even agree with that finding, whether it makes sense based on what you've seen.
I think we've lost our way educationally in this country. I think we have to educate our way to a better economy. I think we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue to push the envelope. We can't think about incremental change. We have to think about transformational change. We used to lead the world in the percent of college graduates. We're now 10th or 11th. That's not good enough. On the most recent study of 15-year-olds' math performance, we were 31st internationally. That's not who we think we are, but that's the reality. So yes, I think we have to get dramatically better, and that's going to take fundamental transformational change and a much greater degree of innovation in our nation's schools.
Okay, I'm going to have to parse through some of that because fundamental innovational change sounds like gobbledygook to a lot of people. We don't know what any of that means. So let's just start with the schools. Do you agree with the people who say that schools are to blame for this lack?
I don't think you can blame any one sector, but do schools need to get dramatically better? Yes. Is it a piece of the problem? Yes.
So what do you mean when you say innovation?
We have to raise the bar for all children, and we have to close the achievement gap that Walter talked about. How do you do that? You do that in a couple ways. You think very differently about how you use technology to engage students, and you think very differently about the talent you're taking into underserved communities. Technology, talent, time, those things make a huge difference in our students' lives, and we have to, again, think radically different about all of those.
As we think about this, are we focusing, you know, I'm a writer, not a fighter, so math and science was not my strong suit when I was in school. So does that mean that I would be shut out of any kind of innovation economy, or especially in the schools, kids who are not focusing on math and science? Or should we be focusing on creativity? Should we be valuing that instead?
We should be doing all of those things, but I will tell you that we have to fundamentally improve the quality of math and science education in this country. We have a shortage of math and science teachers. We've had that shortage for a couple of decades. I think we need to pay math and science teachers a lot more money. I think we have to find ways to engage the private sector, whether it's through alternative certification or helping to mentor existing teachers. We can't continue to do things the same way. Does it mean you're not teaching critical thinking skills as well? Absolutely not. Are you also teaching students how to work in a diverse setting and how to continue to apply their knowledge? You can do all of those, but if math and science doesn't improve as a piece of that, we're kidding ourselves.
Define innovation for me strictly in a classroom context, not what people in your position would be doing, or even what superintendents would be doing, or even, well, let's limit it to teachers and their students.
Yeah. To me, innovation is engaging your students in fundamentally different ways, finding ways to find their passion, finding ways to help them accelerate the pace of learning. Again, we have to get much better, faster. The only way we do that is through innovation.
Give me an example. Where have you seen it working?
We're seeing many, many places where teachers are now using what are called formative assessments, not high-stakes tests at the end of the school year, but ongoing assessments to figure out not are the teachers teaching, but are the students learning. And these assessments are helping teachers to differentiate instruction, figure out small groups of students and group them in ways that make sense. And these formative assessments using technology is helping our best teachers take their craft to an entirely different level. That's got to become the norm, not the exception.
Now, testing for a lot of people is a very scary idea because
Evaluation, not testing,
well,
evaluation.
What's the difference?
There's a big difference. Again, this is no stakes. I do think we need to evaluate students at the end of each year to understand how much progress they've made, but this is not about saying you failed, you didn't, whatever. It's, are you absorbing, are you learning the material you need to know? And the only way you know that in real time is by using these formative assessments, formative evaluations.
You have used the term common standards. Define that for me.
As a country, under No Child Left Behind, we've had 50 different standards, 50 different goalposts, 50 different states doing their own thing. And many people, including Walter Isaacson, who opened this, including Randy Weingartner, who's the head of the AFT, including the business community, have all said that what's happened in the vast majority of states is we have dummied down standards due to political pressure. We need to raise the bar for the entire country, and we've talked about college-ready, career-ready, internationally benchmarked standards. Having 50 states do their own thing does not help our children.
So common standards means everyone has the same measure, but what if you are the mother or father of a special needs student who doesn't meet a common goal?
I think you have to have a common goal, and you have to be working with every child to hit that higher bar. Now, if you have a child that is severely disabled, okay, that's maybe a slight exception.
Well, not severely disabled, but just not a tester or not a
I think we have to raise the bar. I think our expectations have been fundamentally dummied down, and that's a huge problem in this country.
Is this, can this idea work in the system as it exists now, the public school system?
Absolutely. And what you have now, this was a third rail a couple years ago. You couldn't talk about national standards. Right now you have 48 governors, 48 state school chiefs, the heads of both unions, the business community, the philanthropic community, all coming together to work on this. This is really an idea whose time has come. It can absolutely work, and there's been a tremendous amount of progress in the past 8-9 months that would have been unimaginable 18 months ago.
You mentioned Randy Weingarten. What do teachers think about this idea?
Teachers are the ones asking for this. Everybody's asking for this.
They'd rather test the students than the teachers.
No. This is about raising standards for everybody, and there's a recognition that due to political pressure in the vast majority of states, we have reduced standards, we have lowered expectations, and if we want our students to be able to compete in an international economy, in a global marketplace, we have to raise the bar dramatically.
So who's applying the political pressure, and has it completely gone away?
The political pressure has been to reduce standards, and there's tremendous pressure the other direction now to raise them. So there's always going to be...
But who is reducing the standards? Who was applying that pressure?
States.
State governments?
Yes, politicians.
And now they've changed their minds?
Largely. Again, there's always tension, there's always conflict, but this has been a fundamental sea change, absolutely. It's a fundamental breakthrough, and a long way to go. It's still early, but it's absolutely going the right direction.
What role have charter schools played in this shift?
Charter schools, I think, I said repeatedly, are a piece of the answer. They're never the answer. Good charter schools are a huge piece of solution. Bad charter schools are a piece of the problem. For charter schools to be successful, a couple things have to happen. You have to have a very high bar to entry. This cannot be let 1,000 flowers bloom. You have to pick the best of the best, and the chance to educate children, I think, is a sacred obligation. You have to couple that with real autonomy. You have to give them room to move, and clear accountability. And when you do those things, they can be a piece of the solution.
You now oversee a program called Race to the Top, $5 billion worth, more discretionary money than any Secretary of Education has ever had to try to make the changes you're talking about. But how do we know that's not the federal government putting itself in position to impose its goals and standards on local schools, on state oversight boards?
Right. We're going to use our money to invest in states and districts that are doing two things, that are closing the achievement gap and raising the bar for all students. So I've said repeatedly, the good ideas are never going to come from Washington. The good ideas are always going to come at the local level, great teachers, great principals. What we have for the first time is a chance to take to scale what's working. And I've said repeatedly that as we try and get dramatically better, we at the Department of Education have been part of the problem. We've been this big compliance-driven bureaucracy focused on audits, focused on reports, and we're trying to fundamentally change the business we're in to scale up what works, to invest in innovation, and to make sure those best practices aren't reaching a handful of children, but are reaching the overwhelming majority of children. We have a unique opportunity to fundamentally break through and to take to scale what works.
And what you're doing is setting up a competitive system where you only get the money if you meet those standards. Wasn't that kind of what happened with No Child Left Behind as well?
No. There was
Explain the difference.
There was no competition in No Child Left Behind, and standards got dummied down. They got reduced. And there was no upside. There were no incentives there. So this is fundamentally different.
So right now you're in the point of, tell me where you are in this program. You're in the point of judging it?
No, states are currently applying to us, and we're going to review those applications. And this is literally going to be a race to the top. I think a lot of folks still don't believe that we're just not going to fund 50 states. And I assure the audience, and hope you'll hold me accountable, this is going to be a small number of states who can help to lead the country where we need to go and break through.
How to determine the winners and the losers, or are we not looking at it that way?
We are absolutely looking that way. We're looking at folks that have the courage, that have the commitment, and that have the capacity to do these things well.
Okay. I just want to button that up, because what determines who the winners and the losers are in all of these situations is who's setting the goals and what the goals are. Who is setting the goals? It's you?
Yes.
And why we should trust you with that?
Again, it's not about me. It's about saying which states, which districts, which universities, which nonprofits can demonstrate to us their ability to raise the bar for all children and to close the achievement gap, to get dramatically better results for children. And those states that have the ability to do that, that are willing to challenge the status quo, we want to give them hundreds of millions of dollars to take to scale those best practices.
Do we have the resources? You mentioned hundreds of millions of dollars. Do we have the resources to satisfy your goals, your dreams
I think education in this country is underinvested in, undervalued, but let me be clear, we can't just put more money into the status quo. And what we have, thanks to this president and thanks to bipartisan Congress, we have $100 billion in new money to put in education, early childhood, K-12, higher ed. And in all these areas, we're not just going to keep feeding the current situation. In all these areas, we're going to put lots of competitive resources out there to let the best, the hardest working, the most committed demonstrate to the country what's possible.
I don't want to hog the audience here. We do have, or the questions here, we do have a few people with microphones out in the audience who will take, wave your hands, who will take your questions. But I will ask first my final question, then we'll take some questions for you as long as the Secretary will countenance this. In your time in office now, not quite a year, you've bitten off a lot, and they say the same thing about the President. Have you managed to, can you measure in any way advances that you've made in that time, or do you feel like you're still getting up to the at-bat?
No, actually, what's been stunning to me is how much potential incentives have changed behavior. We have 48 states, as we talked about, working on these higher standards. We have about a dozen states that have removed or reduced restrictions to innovation into charter schools. We've seen states that had literal laws, firewalls, imposing in a legal way the separation between student achievement and teacher evaluation, which we think makes no sense whatsoever. We've seen all those things change before we spent one dime.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, just because you asked them to?
No, not because we asked them, but because they're interested in being a potential winner in these competitions. And so what we're trying to use is use unprecedented discretionary resources over the next couple years to drive the kind of changes in behavior that will last for the next couple decades. This is about fundamental transformational change, and to see the level of change in a short amount of time without putting out a dime is unbelievably encouraging about where we can go.
The reason why I ask you that question is because if it were easy, it would have happened already. So what is different now? Just your vision of what innovation can be, or is it the way you're speaking to these?
It has nothing to do with my vision. It has to do with a collective sense of urgency that everyone knows we have to get dramatically better. And as you said, Secretary Page is a good friend of mine who was, preceded Margaret Spellings. He had about $17 million in discretionary resources. We have north of $10 billion. $4 billion in Race to the Top, $3.5 in school improvement grants, $650 million invested in innovation, hundreds of millions of dollars in Teachers Incentive Fund. We have an opportunity that no one else has had. And given it's a tough economy, and given the sense of urgency, Rahm Emanuel has this great line, never waste a good crisis. We have an economic crisis in our country, we have an education crisis. Those two together created an extraordinary opportunity. That's what's different this time.
I wonder if Farmer Emanuel ever regrets having coined that phrase. We have questions from the audience, please. Where are you?
Kent Hughes at the Woodrow Wilson Center. What role do you see business playing in helping improve math science education in the K-12 system?
I think the business community is hugely important. We need to produce more students who can come and work for your companies. We need to produce more students who will be customers for your companies. Having your executives, having your workers come and teach, alternative certification, early retirement, whatever. Having your employees help to train our current math and science teachers. The reason we struggle in math and science is because our teachers don't know enough math and science. And it's hard to teach what you don't know. They don't have the content knowledge. So whether it's mentoring, whether it's actually coming and teach, whether it's providing internships for our students in your companies, I think there's a huge role the business community can play, both from an altruistic partnership sense, but also this makes great business sense. And you're seeing a number of companies around the country invested huge amounts of their both time, their talent, and their actual financial resources to drive up the quality of teaching. Great teachers matter tremendously in education. We talk so much about the achievement gap. I'm frankly much more focused on what I call the opportunity gap. And we're seeing in some of the most underserved communities, inner city, urban, rural, we're seeing the achievement gap disappear, literally disappear, because there are extraordinary adults in those students' lives. The question is, how do we get that to scale? And I think the business community can play a huge role in helping us speed up that rate of change.
How much time would you say you spend wooing the business community?
I spend time every week. That's a part of what I do.
That's a big chunk of your job?
It's an important piece.
Another question back here.
Molly Broad from the American Council on Education. Mr. Secretary, I applaud your commitment to making the allocation of Race to the Top monies to the states that have the deepest, strongest commitment to raise the bar and to do it at scale. But then what's going to happen to the rest of the states?
Great question. So what we have is we have 2 rounds of funding, and every state who doesn't win the first round will get a written response from us about where they came up short, and they can apply in the second round. And what we want to do as a country is demonstrate what's possible, and then we think other states will follow. And so whether it's this competition for states, whether it's investing in innovation, which will go to the districts and nonprofits, we want to continue to shine a spotlight on the way that states or districts or nonprofits can dramatically change the life chances of our students. And we think when we can demonstrate success at scale, that will force the entire country to move. It removes all the excuses.
Alan Merton, George Mason University.
Hey, yeah, good to see you.
You mentioned that math and science teachers should be paid more in the public school systems. What is the union's response to that? And if it's not positive, what's your plan?
I think there's openness on it, and we're going to, we have about $3.5 billion coming for school improvement grants. And let me be really clear, I think teachers in areas of critical need, math, science, special education, some places foreign language, should be paid more. I think great teachers should be paid more to work in historically underserved communities, inner city, urban, rural. Not all these jobs were created equally. In education, we've had lots of disincentives for great talent to go where it's needed most, and very few incentives. And we're trying to fundamentally change that equation. And I think there's a real understanding that some jobs are frankly tougher than others. We've had a shortage of math and science teachers for 3 decades. I don't want to talk about it for 3 decades. I want to fix it. And I think we have an opportunity to fix it. So looking at rewarding those teachers in those hard-to-staff subject areas, and then taking on the hard-to-staff assignments, I think there's a real sense that we have to do things, again, really differently, or we'll just perpetuate the status quo. We'll be talking about shortages of math and science teachers for another 30 years. I don't think any of us have an interest in doing that.
Can I ask you to be more specific in answer to his question about exactly how you speak to the teachers' unions, and have they just suddenly decided this is in their interest as well?
No, I mean, these are all complex issues, but we have very open and honest and candid conversations, and there's an absolute understanding, not just amongst union leadership, and I think the union leadership we have today is more progressive than we've ever had. I don't say that just because Randy's in the room. I honestly believe that. But you have not just amongst the leadership, but also amongst just the rank and file, there's a real understanding that every job is not created the same. And we need to start to recognize those differences.
Who else has got a microphone near them? There are a couple people in the middle. I can't control it. Just pass it on.
Hi, I'm Dee Torrell Caperton from the Worldwide Workshop, a nonprofit in New York City. And thank you, Secretary Duncan, for all these amazing initiatives that you are now generating to mobilize change. A minute ago, Gwen Ilfil asked you, what is it? Is it your vision that is so different than the past 8 years? And you said, no, it's not my vision. But I would like to challenge that response and say that I think it is about vision, and there is no leadership or transformation that will happen without a vision. And maybe you can tell us a little bit more about the vision now and how is it different than the past 8 years?
Well, I think it's really what the president's put on the line is he said we have to educate our way to a better economy. He's drawn a line in the sand. He said by the year 2020, we need to again lead the world in the percent of college graduates. And again, we used to lead the world, 25 years ago. We're now 10th or 11th. I think we're paying the price for that as a country. And so everything we're putting in place from early childhood to K-12 to higher ed is with the ultimate goal of dramatically increasing the percent of college graduates. So that's sort of the moral imperative, the moral and economic imperative is to have a much more educated workforce, population, citizenry. And to get there, we have to do things very differently, and we're trying to do those in all the areas. And to your point, we've absolutely been critiqued for being too ambitious, trying to do too much early childhood, K-12 higher ed. And what I've said repeatedly is I would love to just focus on early childhood, or I'd love to just focus on K-12 or higher ed, but that's not going to get us where we need to go at the rate we need to go. We have to be pushing for fundamental change in all of those areas. That's the only way we're going to get to the president's goal.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much, and Ms. Eiffel, your questions are excellent. I'd just like to ask, how are you going to educate the institutions, not just the students? How are you going to provide models and ways to change that will actually engage people?
Well, let me give you one example that I've been using a lot lately, and again, these ideas are never going to come from Washington. Let me tell you about what the state of Louisiana is doing. The state of Louisiana links student results to their teachers, and they link those results from the teachers back to the teachers' schools of education. So that in Louisiana now, after hundreds of thousands of students and tens of thousands of teachers in English, math, social studies, and science, you now have schools of education changing their curriculum based upon the results of the students of their alumni. Louisiana does not have some patent on some breakthrough technology that nobody else can use. What Louisiana has is the courage to put in place a system not of gotcha, but of continuous improvement. And so my question to the country is, why do we have one state doing that in 2009? What we've lacked is the courage, is the political will. And so what we want to do is shine a spotlight on those places that are putting in place common practices that folks in the business community would say, that's common sense, of course we should be doing it. We have one state doing it. That's not acceptable. And so what we want to do is continue to highlight what is working out there, the great examples, and then challenge the country to step up and to take that to scale.
We have time for 2 more questions, one on this side, and there you go.
Well, I guess this is going to be 2-part now, but I'm a mom, and the first part is...
I'll be the decider about whether you're 2 parts or not.
She's a tough cookie.
My children have always gone to private school and are discovering now that the Chicago math, not to pick on Chicago, didn't work. And so is there a language of math, a real fundamental way to teach math that we should all be embracing? And then number 2, it sounds like Louisiana's idea is a great way to evaluate, but how do we know whether what they were teaching in the first place is something that should be played back to the education institution?
We know it because some students are getting dramatically better results, dramatically better outcomes than others. What's that? In what? In English, math, social studies, and science, across the board. On your first question, what I think is a good question, you sort of started with, what's the federal government's role? I think our goal is to be tight on the goals. As a country, we've been loose, we've had this fundamentally backwards. As a country under No Child Left Behind, we're very prescriptive on how you get there. I'm trying to flip that. I want to be tight on the goal, very loose in how you get there. I don't think there's one magic curriculum. I wish there was. What we want to do is if we have a high common bar that we're all shooting for, we'll see which curriculum make a difference in students' lives. We'll see which teacher training makes a difference in students' lives. We'll see what parental engagement activities make a difference. And some states, some districts are going to soar, and some are going to struggle. But you'll have a chance to learn and evaluate that fairly. Right now, you can't do it. You can't look across states because it's 50 different yardsticks. Sort of unimaginable in the business world. And so what we'll have is we'll have a level playing field, everyone will compete to that higher bar, and we'll see great, great innovation come. Things that work will go to scale. Things that won't work should become obsolete.
Final question.
I'm Nancy Hensel with the Council on Undergraduate Research here in Washington, D.C. And I'd like to go back, I guess, to the previous question and maybe some comments you just made. Colleges of education are not the only professors that are responsible for preparing teachers. And I wonder if you could comment on how you can engage the faculty in science, mathematics, and other disciplines in the preparation of teachers. Thank you.
That's a broad question. I've been pretty tough in my critique of schools of education. I think we have some that do an outstanding job, but overall, frankly, we have a long way to go. And let me sort of explain why at multiple levels. I think at many universities, schools of education have been cash cows. There's been low investment, but lots of student tuition and Pell Grants coming into the university, which has often gone to invest in other departments. I think that's a big problem. I think the caliber of student going into the schools of education has not been as high as it needs to be. Great universities with great schools of education absolutely integrate the math and science faculty into that teacher preparation so that the teachers don't just have the theory of education, the philosophy of education, the history of education. They actually know math and science. They know the content. That should be the norm, not the exception. Great schools of education make sure student teachers are actually teaching or out in classrooms spending time. And they make sure that teachers are learning about these new formative data that we talked about and how to apply that. As I've traveled the country and talked to hundreds and hundreds of teachers, the two biggest critiques they have is not enough hands-on practical experience and not enough experience really understanding how this formative data is transforming their craft. And so it's not just about schools of education, it's about universities making this really important, but schools of education have to step up and be a bigger part of the solution. No one right now today, no one gets a pass. We all have to behave in very different ways.
Thank you, Secretary Arne Duncan. Thank you for smarter questions than I asked. And
Thank you so much.
best of luck.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thank you.